Test 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, everyone, it's 5:30. We're calling the meeting to order. Will everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to the New Mexico flag? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera por los Estados Unidos de América, la república que representa una nación bajo de Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, and this is a symbol of our friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de México, simbología, amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas. What? You go fast. I've only said it like 1,000 times, right?
I can't even speak Spanish that fast.
Yeah, you can. You do speak it that fast. All righty. First item, 1C, is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? None opposed. Let the record show that there's 4 of us here, that Rudy has texted in that he's late, tied up at a commission meeting. And next item, well, the next item would normally be, are we not having a translator tonight? We don't have to announce it. There's nobody here. Is anyone out there need a translator? Okay. And so the next item on the agenda is public forum. And Dr. Ryan, anybody signed up for public forum? Or whoever's handling it today? Alma? I'm sorry? That's fine.
Mr. President, while we're waiting, a point of personal privilege.
Of course.
I'd like to introduce Nicole Romero, who will be taking minutes this evening.
That's a pretty color laptop you have there. Nice to meet you, Nicole. Thank you for joining us. And folks are finishing signing up for public forum, and when that's done, they'll bring the list down, and we'll move on to public forum. Dr. Ryan, how many are signed up? 4? Okay. 5? Oh, I see.
It looks green to me. I think maybe a little colorblind.
I'm not colorblind at all. I have perfect eyesight.
Well,
That's not
it
green.
is green.
Well, maybe like a khaki. Would you go through a light that was that color?
Yes.
And Dr. Ryan, go ahead, please.
There are 5 people signed up for public forum tonight. And observe the 3-minute time limit. I will give a 30-second warning when your time is almost up. Public commentary and dialogue is allowed only during the public forum, not throughout the meeting. Please search for answers on common ground. You may speak on any topic, whether it's on the agenda or not. Your input will be taken into consideration, and please be advised that the board may discuss your issue during the meeting, but by law, the board cannot take action on items that are not on the agenda. And with that, our first speaker is Miguel Acosta.
Who's the second speaker so they can see a standby in the third?
Melissa Clayton, and then Andrea Provost.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board, Madam Superintendent, and I can vouch that Rudy's in the meeting because I was over there at that commission meeting myself. Wanted to take this opportunity to thank the district, in specific the superintendent, Chanel, and the folks that are supporting schools out along Airport Road. In the last month or so, we've had some very good family-school interactions around selecting a principal, the assistant principal, preparing for an open house, a meet and greet. There's a lot of good energy, goodwill developing, and people are very grateful for the opportunity to partner around their children's education. So given that, I was concerned about the reports around the parent code of conduct. Not because it's not an issue, because I know it is, and we had to deal with it when I was at APS. Matter of fact, at several schools, we had concerns about parent behavior during sports events. The concern, though, there's two concerns. One, we're actively trying to get parents to show up. And matter of fact, I met with the soccer coaches the new soccer coaches at Capitol, and we're trying to get going Jaguar Nation kind of thing, trying to get more community to show up, whether they have kids on the team or not, trying to do tailgating, make it a social Capitol building kind of activity on the south side. And these kinds of messages aren't necessarily supportive of that kind of endeavor. And also kids can't control their parents and their parents' behavior. There are conversations that have to happen, but I don't think that this would be necessarily the most effective way of dealing with that. So I appreciate the conversation. Let's have those conversations out there with communities, with families, et cetera. But let's not shoot ourselves in the foot and start creating more barriers to participation, especially at a moment when we need more community building, we need more partnerships, and we have to maintain the goodwill. Whatever goodwill we have to try to multiply it as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel.
Our next speaker is Melissa Clayton, and then Andrea and Cruz will be following.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Lujan, and everyone else to the right of me. Thank you for having me here this evening. My name is Melissa Clayton, and I'm a PE teacher at Milagro Middle School, and I'm also a coach. And I am here to also address the code of conduct for parents at sporting events. Yesterday, when I opened the newspaper at my mom's, that was the first thing that caught my eye. And I was so taken back by it. You know, as an educator, we teach our children to take ownership of their own behavior. And when I saw that they may be penalized because of parental behavior, I thought, being a coach, solutions, right? We want solutions to help to help parents become better involved and engaged rather than being bad sports. And I came up with 5 ideas. Being a coach, I always draw up a contract that both athletes and parents have to sign. And one of the things that the parents have to agree to is conducting themselves appropriately at a sporting event. I think something else that's really important to ensure that that happens is that we need administrative support at our sporting events, which usually is there. But I think if our security officers assigned to each building, I know at Milagro this has happened in the past, that maybe they come in at 10 o'clock the day of a football game and stay through the duration of the football game so that we have that presence there. And people know that they need to conduct themselves in a responsible, professional, adult manner. I think that could be another solution. As I said, you know, coaches, I've drawn up a contract. Mr. Bernardino, his daughter played volleyball for me. He can attest to the contract that we've drawn up, and I know they do it at Santa Fe High too, but I think that's a good way to let the parents know that, hey, we're all in this for kids, and it's going to be an important part for them to conduct themselves appropriately. It's also my understanding that NMAA has a penalty for parents that act out inappropriately. I know that for a fact because during a volleyball match, I had a parent come down off the stands and verbally attack me during the middle of the game and in front of my athletes. It was quite embarrassing, more so for his daughter than it was for me. But the official actually came down off the stand and told the parent that they needed to leave. So I think as a community, if we come up with some other resources to support our children and not have them, don't let them take ownership for their parents. Please don't do this. You know, we want our kids to nurture and to bloom and to blossom, and this isn't supporting that. So please take these suggestions into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Melissa.
Is Andrea here?
She's not here yet.
Cruz?
Yeah, those are her sons. They're not here yet either, sorry.
None of the other three speakers are here yet.
Then we're going to move on. So that's it for public forum.
Well, just a second, we have made exceptions in the past for when people
No, we
are
have.
not here. So, can I finish speaking?
Of course.
So when they come, I would like for them to be able to speak to us.
What we'd probably do is if we were in the middle of the next presentation, though, we'd probably... Now, will you let me speak? So if we're in the middle of the next presentation and they come, what we'd probably do is have them speak afterward. Great. So let's go ahead, and then the next item on the agenda is the presentation, the school opening dashboard. And
Thank
so-
you.
Oh, and just so the public understands, in case they didn't read, and the reason we're having this meeting on the 31st is that the way the days fell in July, it meant that our first meeting for the board would have been on the 7th, only 1 week before school opening. And in the past, at least while I've been on the board these 7.5 years, we've always had ample time between the first board meeting and school opening to address any issues. So I felt that it was very important to have at least 2 weeks and therefore schedule a special meeting for this evening to really look at the school dashboard. And that's why we're having this special meeting at the end of July tonight. And I'm sorry for the inconvenience for staff, but while you are our constituents as well, there are thousands of others who are interested in what's going on. So that's why we're here. Thank you. And yes, Ms. Price?
I just want to say that I'm not in favor of us having this meeting, but we're having the meeting. It seems to me that the job of opening schools should be left to the people who open schools. And for them to be sitting here catering to us, I know the telephone calls that they're not answering right now from sites. There are calls, people are already doing their jobs. The last thing they need is for these people to be sitting here catering to us. That's one of the reasons why we took July off, was so that we would not have to put the staff and the cabinet at an inconvenience during a time when they should be doing what they do and needing what they need and getting the support that they need for the sites and this makes no sense to me.
I appreciate that, and I would add that I, for one, am very curious as to where we are on staffing, where we are on facilities being ready, where we are on vacancies, and with only 2 weeks left, school opens 2 weeks from tomorrow. I think it is of public concern, and it's a right for them to know, too, what's happening in the district. And I don't think anyone on this board disrespects staff in any way whatsoever, but that's why we're here tonight. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Tonight, we're going to present the first dashboard to you. We've been working on this actually for several weeks now, every week on cabinet. And these numbers change daily, hourly, as principals come in and fill in data. The principals just came back. I think it's been, I'm looking at Ms. Sink or Mr. Bernardino. When did our principals get back, actually? July 22nd, 25th. And so they're also getting their grounding. But if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the monitoring began the second week of July. It will continue through the first 3 weeks of school with the following areas of focus. Staffing, principal checklist, which we'll go into detail in a little while. Facility readiness, IT readiness, instructional materials being delivered to schools, and safety and security readiness. There are other things that we monitor and work with our principals on that are not on the checklist, so this is not exhaustive. The opening of schools dashboard is updated in real time. So throughout the day, this continued to change. District staff reviews it daily. As I said earlier, superintendent and cabinet also review it each Monday, and then there's a sub-team that also meets, and the results are compiled for your review. The next slide. I think when this was created, the PowerPoint was created, we thought that the dashboard would be up to date as of noon today, but actually in real time, Jeff, when did we get this snapshot?
Later afternoon.
So this is around 4 o'clock. My understanding and the guide to this, and I'll ask perhaps Mr. Ryan to respond, is, and I think it may look khaki-ish or green, but the khaki-ish or green color, that is green. It doesn't look as green over there. The red is an area of concern, obviously. The yellow doesn't really mean caution. It just means there is a plan in place. But can you give just the guide to the key, just for people that are watching, or for example, Mr. Garcia was not on the board before, and I think is this your first time? No, you've been through this. All right, sorry, Ms. Noble. But would you just go over the guide for the audience?
Yes, on the first part, which is staffing, there's only 2 colors, green and red. If you're fully staffed, it's green at that position. You'll notice there's principals or classroom teachers or other support staff that are at the school. If it's red, it means that there's an opening that needs to be filled. This is a tally sheet. Each one of the schools across the top has their own individual sheet where there's principal comments, staff comments, principal and staff comments on what the problems are, what the time for resolution will be. As you go down the chart, it turns into 3 colors. Red being it is not done, and it won't be done, at least we don't have a plan to get it done before the start of school. Yellow means we're aware of that and there is a plan in place, it is being acted on. So if there's construction at a facility and that construction is going to end on Monday, and then the other groups can get filled, that says we understand that there's an issue right now. It's not going to be marked green because it's not completed yet, but there is a plan in place to get it done. And then green means that it is completed. It has a number 2 that will turn that cell green. That's the same for the principal's checklist. And then as you go down, the departments are also going into the schools and making sure that everything is green, with the intent that by the time that school starts, all of these will be turned into a green status.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. So the first individual that will be presenting today is our Executive Director of Human Resources. I do want to say that this is a collaborative effort. We all own this. It's not just Human Resources. Many at the district level have been trying to help with vacancies or, going through personnel files. We don't have a lot of principals on contract during the summer. And so once they leave, which is about 5 days after school is out, they're not on contract. And we do pay a few to stay on. The high school principals are on. And so as we have monitored this, we have, I sent out directive through Ms. Zink and directly to Ms. Wilson Segura, to Ms. Romero, that in many instances, if we had not heard from the principal and made attempt to contact them, that we were going to hire. I know that we prefer to allow principals to hire, but we were losing people. The other issue is that interzone transfers have to be handled. And with the interzone transfers, there were a lot of shifts that happened internally that is just a policy that they get first choice. But that holds us back, and we lose people. And it's something that I think policy-wise, we're not going to be able to address it this year, but it's something that I think we need to work out with the union and with the board. I recognize that we want to give our employees first dibs, but it does hold us back, and then particularly when principals are gone. And so if a principal was waiting for, God, they love that art teacher at School X and teacher wants to come here, that vacancy stays open and we can't move on it. And we might have then we lose an art teacher that could have gone to the other school. You understand what I'm saying? So this responsibility is not entirely HR's, it's a lot of us working together. We had volunteers calling everyone that left, and we'll go over that exit survey at another time. 178 hours were put into that exit survey, and also to try to get people to come back. We also looked at retirees and calling them to see who we could get back. So I want you to know that it's been all hands on deck and a full effort to try to staff. And actually, considering where the state is and where we are with salaries and where we are with the evaluation process, I think that the team has done a good job. Is it where we would like it to be? We like it all to be zeros. And we're still going to continue to work towards that as we move into the beginning of the school year. So, Mr. Bernardino, please.
Good evening, Board President Carrillo, members of the board, Superintendent. I will address every line so you know where we are at in terms of status of those FTEs. We do have an assistant principal vacancy at Ortiz, and today there were interviews held for that position, so we will have an assistant principal within the next 2 to 3 days. When it comes to classroom teachers, I do want to define that a little bit.
Let's also say the positive. We have all principals staffed.
Correct. Classroom teachers, just to kind of give you a volume of how many FTEs we have in our district, that is 932 teachers. So I'll try to do my best and give you approximate percentages in terms of vacancies. But I do want to define classroom teachers a little bit further here. And within classroom teachers, we have STEM, bilingual teachers, and kinder, pre-K, and regular teachers. So it's kind of grouped, but in my department, we track them separately, just so that we know where our emphasis needs to be. Out of the 22.7, in terms of STEM, we have 4 FTE that are vacant. And in the state of New Mexico, to find a STEM teacher, it would be like finding gold in my backyard. And they're very difficult to find. Bilingual teachers, today we got an applicant. She was awarded a visa, and so we look forward for hiring her. She's worked in the past with us. So we should be there closing that vacancy. In terms of regular teachers, that's where we have the majority. We have 10 at the elementary school. We have 3 at the community schools. We have 2 at the middle schools and 2 at the high schools. When I mean regular teachers at the elementary, it's first to 5th grade. At the middle schools and high schools, it can be an language arts teacher and so forth. And that 22.7 is approximately 2.5% of our all teacher. That's our vacancy rate in terms of classroom teachers.
How does that compare to last year, Mr. Bernardino, more or less?
On the first day, I believe it's approximately 13 or 16 vacancies we had last year on first day. That was my understanding.
We don't have a comparison for right now, so we'd have to wait till first day. Okay,
Correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Mr. Bernardino, I imagine there are a number of people in the queue right now that are right in line that are being interviewed, and so this number I'm certain is going to go down. I'm not worried about it. But how many people would you say are in the queue right now and we're just finishing up their paperwork and getting ready for their assignments?
Board President Carrillo, just to try to understand your question, are you asking well, let me step back a little bit.
I can rephrase it. There are 22.7 vacancies.
Okay.
How many people right now are being processed by HR and right now you think will be ready to go on the first day of school?
I understand. Thank you. We have, I believe, 6 offers that were extended, and we're still waiting a response. As of 12 o'clock, we have 3 recommendations that were made by principals. Now, I'll give you there was a school where the principal made 7 recommendations in the last 2 weeks, and she was only able to get 1. So 6 declined it, unfortunately. They go to our neighbors' districts. You have Bernalillo. We're competing with Bernalillo, Rio Rancho, Albuquerque, Pecos, Pojoaque, Espanola, and they're all relatively close when it comes to commute time. So right now it's crunch time, and I couldn't give you exactly a number that I can solidify as of right now. Okay. Education paraprofessionals, typically those are high every year when we start before we start first day of school. And the rationale behind that, and that goes between education of pros and special education paraprofessionals. They have to go through a series of tests or bring transcripts and certifications. And I'll give you an example. For the EAs, they have to either have transcripts or pass a test for them to get certified. And then they have to go to PED, get their license, and then come back to us, and then we can hire them. Not everybody that has an EA license comes to us. That's a very small amount of individuals. Same thing for special ed. However, for special ed, they go through 2 or 3 other certifications on top of what EAs go through. So that takes additional time. So that's where the lag time also occurs to kind of expedite the process to hire them.
Excuse me, then what is the opening pay for these paraprofessionals and sped paras?
For the education paraprofessionals, the new salary table, I want to quote, I think it was $12.05, I believe, or $12 even. It is 12.
Both are just as bad. Okay.
But for special education, because they do have to go through a more rigorous
Do they go through the CIP? Is this called CIP?
CPI.
CPI training, right? I
Yes,
did
and
that,
they
yeah.
also have to have a CPR certification as well. Their starting pay is $15.75, I believe.
Thank you.
Sure. For the next line is the special teachers. That one is always difficult because you have art teachers and PE teachers, which their FTE is split. We have one school where they're looking for a 0.2 or a 0.3 art teacher, and those are very difficult to find because a full FTE is where they would like to have, but we only have a 0.3 in one school and 0.2 in another school. So we have to be creative and try to bring some of these candidates in depending on their certification. So sometimes we'll put them in a regular classroom or a PE, and then in art if they have both certifications to get a full FTE. And then that also takes some time. I do want to bring this to your attention when it comes to special education teachers. Last year, if I remember correctly, there were 13 vacancies on day one for special education. The year prior to that, I believe we had 6. I'm very happy that our executive director of special education has been very proactive this summer, and I can report to you we have 0 vacancies for
Fantastic.
special education. So thank
Way to
you.
go.
Thank
Very
you.
good, Julie.
It was a lot of hard work. I know that Ms. Lucero and my team worked together a lot, and some principals as well. With secretaries, I believe we will be able to close that vacancies. And counselors, I did talk to Sue O'Brien earlier today, and she is working on looking at all the applications to fill all those counselors. And she appears optimistic. I don't know if she's here right now. With nurses, that one is.
Can we go to counselors? Because I know that we allocated additional funds for counselors. I'm wondering if any of those, remember?
Mr. President, the social workers that we added are in that contingency.
Got it. Okay, they're counted as different. So when you're thinking counselors, and I remember going over this a couple weeks ago online, and the counselors, the National Counselors Association, that the rule of thumb is one counselor to 250 kids. And so I'm wondering, obviously that means we'd have at least 5 counselors at both of the comprehensive high schools. I mean, a minimum of 5. So what is our counselor ratio?
We'd have to look at that, Mr. President. I think we can calculate it. I thought that the ratio was higher. Actually, I think it should be lower. But I remember that according to the association, I think that ratio is higher. I think if you have a really small school district, just by de facto, you're going to have it. But we can certainly provide you that info.
Okay, well, so, I mean, it was on
We
their
don't have it
website,
off
so
the
I'm
top of
curious.
our head.
No, that's fine. So, but how many counselors then are we expecting, or is our goal to hire at both the comprehensive high schools and the 2 middles, comprehensive middles?
I don't have that number in front of me. Are you asking how many FTEs allocated to each of the 2 high schools?
But we only have 2.5 vacancies.
Correct.
So those are the vacancies we're filling.
Okay, I understand that. And then how many counselors are we have at each high school?
Oh.
What's the goal of each high school in terms of how many counselors
And
they
we'll
have?
provide that information to you of what was allocated. And I don't know, maybe Richard, you can look it up online to see what was the allocation for the high schools for counselors?
FTEs.
Okay, FTE. And then when we get that info, we'll provide it for you.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions on counselors? No?
Thank you.
Sure. And nurses and health aides, for nurses, we only have 2 throughout the whole district. And health aides, they also have to go through a certification before they become a health aide. So there is a process, and we do have applicants for the head nurse to review. So I feel confident that we'll get close to 0. The 0.4 is where it gets a little bit tricky to find someone that is willing to work 2 days of the week. Okay. And librarians, we have 0 vacancies on those. And I stand for any further questions.
Just a quick note, Mr. Garcia is now here, just for the record. He arrived about 5 minutes ago. Thank you, Rudy. Any board members have any questions so far? Ask now. Yes.
So,
And then Ms. Noble.
a very good job. I'm really pleased with special ed. I know, having been a former special ed teacher, those are always hard vacancies, so this is great to start the school year. On the classroom teachers, 22, I think, is great, at this point in time. We want all of our classrooms with teachers, and I know you probably have, but do we have contingency plans that we've talked with some of our retired teachers to maybe come in and sub if we cannot close that delta between now and then?
Board President Carrillo, Vice President Cashman, we do have a plan in terms of having we're focusing on having a qualified teacher in the classroom. We already have substitutes that we know that have taken long-term assignments that are ready for us to just give them a call and assign them to a classroom. We also pulled a retiree list. We've sent that to a couple of principals, and that's how they've been able to fill some of these vacancies. So we do have that.
And we've had the executive directors that supervise the schools going through that retiree list, and Ms. Sink, I hope that they are still staying on that. We've also, and I've talked to Ms. Sink about that, and we've worked with HR there and Dr. Ryan. we've had some instructional coaches or just plain instructional coaches, I shouldn't say plain, but they're not digital coaches, that have been offered jobs. We have a math coordinator that's sort of in, what people would like to pull for the school. So we're trying to work through that because I don't want to lose these people because they want a promotion, but then I also don't want to pull them from the school when we need them. I've also told Ms. Zink that if we need to, we may have to send some district staff to cover classes if we're very close to filling those positions instead of going with long-term subs. So I think you see the improvement in numbers. This has been a full court press by everyone. I think in the past, it's kind of been, HR's been out there dangling by itself. The principals are gone for this big chunk of time, and you've got the transfers. After I really understood what the problems were in working with him, I think that's why you see the improvement, because all of us are owning this problem.
And I would say from just past years, I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing in staffing. I mean, obviously, we'd like to be completely staffed at this point in time, but I know that's not reality. So I think very good job getting us to this point this early. And hopefully, everybody stays and don't take another job offer from a different district and desert us at the last minute.
Because this is a great place to work.
Yeah.
But, another example, and we'll talk, next, you'll hear about it in board review, and at the next board meeting, we're going to talk about our reorg and Team Santa Fe. Some of you have heard a little bit about it. But, for example, with ECO, we didn't have the principal yet. Mr. Gephardt supervising that school. He started staffing that school before the principal came. And so I think those are the kinds of things that we're going to have to do if we're, because we can't afford to extend the principal contract, where the district staff are going to be more assertive in staffing in that midterm, which then gives grist for the mill for HR to be able to do its job. So it's been a tremendous team effort, and I'm very proud of them. We're not going to rest till it's all green, but that's our goal.
Thank you. And I've only seen this once before, but I'm very impressed, especially given that the principals came back on the 25th. So it's not even a full week of work as to where we are, and special ed is extraordinary. So that's really great to see. And I just had a quick question. You said there were 2 nurses district-wide full-time. How many librarians do we have district-wide? Okay.
Richard, Mr. Halford, can you look up, please, did you get the FTE for the high schools on counselors? So you want to report that, and then we'll... My phone's about dead, so the screen's gone. But if he has it, he can do that, and then, or you can just report it, go up and report it, Ms. Zink, because you're up next anyway. And Mr. Halford, can you look up librarians for us, please?
We have for capital 5 FTEs for counselors, Santa Fe High 4.0 FTEs for counselors.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Mr. Hafford has provided that information.
I'm sorry, was that number correct on nurses?
We have 2 2 actual nurses throughout the district. The majority are health aides.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just comment? That would be understandable because nurses can make much more out in the hospitals and in the private sector than what we can pay for a school nurse. So unless you like that type of work, it's very hard to get school nurses.
Yes, Mr. Garcia.
So these two full-time certified nurses, what schools are they located at?
Board secretary, I don't have that number.
You can see one's in Milagro, and looking at the chart.
Oh, I see.
And you can see where they are. You missed the first part of the presentation where if you look in the top, Mr. Garcia, you can see the school name.
Right.
Did you find it?
Yes.
Thank you.
And so how do...
I misunderstood the question.
At Tesuque Elementary School, how do you get a .4 of a nurse?
Board secretary, it's all based on student population. And the head nurse, it's my understanding, Ms. Sink may be able to speak more to it, but it's my understanding they have a matrix based on what the student population is.
I think you got a little more complicated, like,
Okay.
like
Yeah,
where did I come from, and the parents telling you how that happened. They want to know if they came from Arkansas or Santa Fe. I think the real question here was the .4 is 2 days a week. The FTE is just, so like a full FTE would be 5 days a week. .2 would be 1 day a week, or it could be .2 of a whole day, 5 days a week. But usually they do that .4. It just kind of goes that way.
Thank you. I was just wondering if we were cutting a nurse in half, but how
Well,
do you
and
actually?
that's the thing, our kids don't get sick on a certain day, and I think that's something that you all have talked about, that we would love all our schools, and I think that's the whole basis of the sufficiency lawsuit, that our kids don't get sick on a particular day or Tuesday, Thursday mornings. We need full-time nurses, we need full-time counselors.
And who actually chooses the school that the nurse is at?
So how this works is that when they build the budgets, and when we made that presentation, the CFO with Ms. Sink, with the direct supervisors from the schools, with district staff, and the principals come in with their recommendation for their needs, what they need at their school. And then that's how they allocate their resources. It's based on the resources they have, based on the numbers of kids that they have. The school that you're talking about now, I missed it, was it Acequia Madre?
Oh, no, the full nurse is at Milagro, and then the other.
What was the question where the .4 was? Tasuke. So it's a very small school. So we have a very tiny school. You don't have economies of scale. We do put additional resources there. I don't know the specific decision about Tasuke. Ms. Sink maybe might be able to fill you in, because I don't really sit in on those meetings. Ms. Sink?
I have yes, Ms. Noble, and then me.
And just to clarify, we don't actually have the numbers at the schools, we only have the vacancies on this chart. On this chart, there are, no. So Secretary Garcia's question was, where are the full-time nurses? It's not in the chart, we only have the vacancies
Then we can
here.
provide that. This is a readiness for schools, so we're trying to look at vacancies. In terms of allocation, when we did that breakdown for you of FTE for the whole district, Mr. Helford, if we can, on a following superintendent's update and follow-up, provide the FTEs for each school so that they can see how many counselors, how many nurses that each school chose. One philosophical discussion that I've started to have with you, but we've never really gone deep on, and that's the philosophical issue around site-based management and building budgets. Or do we believe that we should allocate based on the school, and have resources that way, that we say every school, based on X number of kids, should have whatever portion of a counselor or a full counselor or a portion of a nurse, as the budget will allow. So we've talked about what should a basic program look like versus site-based budgeting. I don't think it's something we want to get into today, but it is a discussion that we should have at some point.
Also, really quick, Mr. President, is in regards to, so the way I'm reading this chart is there's a vacancy for a nurse at Milagro, and I would just hope to like to see that a full-time nurse, or there's a lot more time spent at a school that's combined, 2 different junior highs that's combined in one school now, because that seems like there's a lot of population there, which we've heard. So I would like to see how we can get more hours of these, 1 and 2 of these nurses to Milagro. Thank you.
Additional, Ms. Noble, you had your hand up? All right.
Board President Creo, Board Member Mr. Garcia, I just want to reinforce again that if we don't have a nurse there, then we usually have a nurse assistant to pick up the rest of the days. It is based on student enrollment, and Anita Hett is the person that actually does the hiring of the nurses. And because it's very difficult to find nurses in our community, because they do pay more in the hospitals and whatnot, and they're even having troubles finding them as well, then we have a huge competition. Therefore, we do contracting with companies such as CES which they do get a little bit more pay that way. So that's one way we offset that and continue to hire nurses.
Question. And also, as I understand it, it's the SACs along with, right, principals that are looking at their budget, and they're also looking at their population in determining what they may need. And definitely at schools, and correct me if I'm wrong, with more at-risk populations, they might need more FTEs on nurses. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then in that case, the Fair Student Funding, because these kids are more at risk and the funding is following the kid, they have that in the budget, and then it would be incumbent upon the SAC and the principal and those involved in recognizing that and not shortchanging the kids on the nurse side. Would that be true?
That is true, and that's one of the reasons we do the budget days, if you will,
Right.
so that all of us are in the room, including Anita Hutt is with us, and so we look at each school with their culture, their whole makeup of their school and
Right.
their needs, and the SAC.
However, with that said, with Fair Student Funding, the downside is that some of your smaller schools don't, because of economies of scale, or they don't have certain factors, we wind up having to do a supplement to it. So it all kind of comes out back to the same place. So I don't know. I mean, I do understand the theory behind it, and they do get more title money anyway. But the other part of it, we wind up having to supplement Acequia, El Dorado, Carlos Gilbert, all of those schools, because otherwise they wouldn't have enough money to hardly make the school run.
So I'm going to go ahead and work on the principal's checklist and remind you again that we had the principals begin officially July 25th. They have been, most of them have been involved in hiring throughout the summer, but when they actually came back on the 25th, we grabbed them on the 27th to have a PD, so it's been hard for them to get back in their schools and really get to work on some of this. But I will say, during this talk, that during the highlights is that, again, most of the principals are doing a lot at home too. It's not like they go home for the summer, and I, as a past principal for many years, they may be at home, but they're still working a lot.
I have a question. It seems, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers on the principal checklist, and it seems like it's an inverse of how the calculations were done on the staffing. Like where there are zeros, it's red, and where there are twos, it's green. And so, I'm like, what, like, just take Academy at Leto Goite. Individual staff, welcome back, PED plan, 80% done. Why is it a 2?
Because
It is the inverse, it's just
top
as
one
you
is-
said.
The top one is vacancies.
Right?
That's the
And
number of
and
vacancies.
that's a negative, whereas these are pluses. We've got this done, we have that, this done, we have that done.
A 2
So
is
it is
green,
inverse.
they're complete.
Okay, so it's just 0,
It's-
1, and 2.
Yeah, and
Got it.
that's right.
All
And
right.
so you'll see in many places where they're 1s, that means they're planning.
Okay.
It means they're moving. I do worry about the reds, but some of these could be new teachers. So for instance, if you see keys not issued yet, I'm sure there really is a plan for the keys, but they won't give out the keys till the first day, that kind of thing. When on the welcome PD, I noticed a new principal hasn't finished that yet. So we work with the principals on all of these. So we'll work with new principals on even their first day, and the kinds of things that teachers love to talk about and work on, morale building, team building, but also they'll probably be looking at data, park data, et cetera. So we'll be working with principals on that. Same for open house. Most principals, veteran principals, have that down.
But, yeah, yes, and really quick,
Okay.
Mr. President, can you explain to me how to read the bottom chart? Because they're different.
So
All right,
would
so-
you please start with the first one and just go through them, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on the individual school staff, welcome back PD plan is the first one I just talked about.
And that's professional development plan.
Yes, the professional development. If you look up at the schools up at the top, for instance, Amy Beal has a 2. That means they're ready to go for that first day's PD, professional development, and the welcome.
So if you look at the number on the left for total, this one has, where the other one had vacancies, this one has how many have 2s, right? So 80% of them are ready, are all done.
Ready to go.
But then if you look at a Second Madre, they have a new principal there. So that would make sense that she's planning it, but it's not totally finished yet. She just came back a few days ago. Cesar Chavez has a new principal, so that's not a surprise that it's a 1. But they're in progress, and they're working with them.
And once again, Mr. President, what does the 0 mean? The red 0?
A 0 means that they're, I would tell you that they're probably working on it, but they haven't come to, conclusion on it yet. They still need help and support and working on it.
Or they haven't filled it in. So, for example, keys, that first 0, and we probably should number these, where it says keys issued and documented. And I think it's for, if I can read up, is it ECO or is it Chaparral?
Chaparral.
So it might be that she hasn't issued her keys yet, or maybe she has a different way of doing it.
Yeah, and that's what I
She's,
mentioned, that she just probably really does have a plan because she's been doing this. She just hasn't done it yet, so she called it a 0. So it's up to the principals what they call
And
it.
she may have it already set
That's
up and
right.
ready to go, but they're not actually issued.
Right.
Mr. President?
Yes, Rudy and then me.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I really appreciate that you're actually leaving it up to the principals to kind of determine or state where they are within their school. Thank you.
So then based on what you were saying, I'd have to look at places where there's been a principal a really long time, the same principal, and I just glanced at this, El Dorado and Carlos Gilbert. So is this because maybe they haven't updated their information today or yesterday?
Possibly, yes.
Okay.
And so we are continually, every day, we call principals to find out how we support them. And so this should turn, I would tell you, by next week. So for instance, as we look down for confirming teacher classroom assignments, you can tell most of those are green because we do a lot of that in June and May, actually. If you go to student schedules, we do a lot of that during the summer. So many of them are in the planning stage and are probably almost finished with that, but they didn't feel comfortable putting a 2.
So on student schedules, and I know this was something that you were very concerned about, on the opening day last year, I don't know how it was at Capitol, what system Principal Runyon uses, but I know that it was his first year, but I can tell you that the previous years it was the same at Santa Fe High. There were mountains of kids in lines that did not have their schedules for the first several days of school at least Santa Fe High. So I'm wondering, what is Principal Morano doing to make sure that kids are actually in class for the first 3 days of school and not in hallways trying to negotiate schedules?
So I will get in touch with him. At this point, I haven't had any red flags on any of that scheduling, nor with the tech department or anyone involved in scheduling. So if you will give me time, I will look into that with Mr. Morano.
Okay.
And I agree, because I remember I saw that at Capitol High my first year, where there were lots of kids doing schedule changes, and it was a madhouse. So it is something we need to look at.
And well, I wasn't done.
I'm just telling you.
You can follow up when I'm done. And then, so at Santa Fe High, and I'm looking to Capitals. Okay, so, it's reasonable then for the board to expect, since both of these are numeral 2, that it's handled. And then,
Correct.
so when I go to the first day to drop by Santa Fe High, because I go there every first day, I'm not going to see a bunch of kids outside the library in line.
You might.
I might see some, but I'm not, right. You know what I mean. I'm not going to see.
And then you'll let me know, and we'll work
Okay.
on it.
Okay.
I can also say, as a past principal and also curriculum assistant that did master schedules, that students try very hard to come back, and after summer school, for instance, they passed a course and now they want to change their schedule. We get new students, probably, you could end up with 100 new students. So there will be people standing out there because we wanted to get that done as fast as we can to get them in the correct classes. But I'll work with both principals to see where we are as soon as possible. Get back to you. And
Maureen?
have more information on the 7th.
Great. Thanks. Ms. Cashman?
And I would say that is a concern for the board schedules, because not so much at the elementary schools, but at the middle schools and the high schools, we do get calls from parents saying, my kid said they did nothing all day. So I know you guys are aware of it, but it is a concern for the community if their kids are sitting there and they don't have a schedule. And if they're not handed out ahead of time, I'm not sure how we're doing that, so they know, Bell 1, this is where you go, you get your schedule, you're sitting in math class right away. So if we could just make sure our principals know that the board will get calls on that.
I will do that.
Mr. President. Yes, Mr. Garcia. Just to reiterate that a little bit also, especially at the middle schools, because that's a time in life when students actually have a new schedule, and they're coming from elementary to, and I know you guys are working on it, but just got to say that for the record. Thank you.
President Carrillo, Board Member Garcia, not only do the principals work on it, but most of them have jump starts to work with kids in transition. And so we're very well aware of kids and their anxiety. We take them around to the schools and meet their teachers early when there's no other upperclassmen around. And so we take that day very seriously so kids feel more comfortable when they come back the next day.
Thank you.
So I'll move along. The mentor assignments, they keep occurring as they find out who are the new teachers in each of the schools, and then we start assigning our mentors to them. We have that assigned very quickly so that we can get in and meet those teachers. As we already talked a little bit about the keys issued and documented. The bell times, there were only 2 schools that we had any change in bell times which would affect transportation. That was Piñon and Eco. And that's all set to go. Piñon's moving to 8 to 3. Eco's moving from 8:30 to 3:25. So I think that's all set, and we really pushed hard to have a set school times. Last year, I worked very hard on that with Elias to make sure all of our instructional minutes were perfect and that we had days for snow days, and we've asked principals that they need to come through us to change their bell schedule. So that's why there's only 2 changes this year. Duty schedules will be something that they'll keep working on in the next week or 2. Get the duty set. That depends on, teachers have a choice. They can say no, so it takes a while to talk them into it.
I'm saying this on bell schedules and bell times because this is, I don't know if some schools ring a bell for this, recess. So I know that several years ago, the board adopted a policy like 2.5 years ago around recess, because we knew there were schools where kids were not getting it, and it was being used in sometimes punitively, or it was used to keep kids in the class and study. And so the board policy was such that, yeah, that's fine. The board policy was such that we said there has to be recess in the morning, afternoon, and you can't attach them to lunch. Can't attach everything to lunch to try to get out of the others. What is because we have a lot of new principals and there's been just a lot of change. What is being done, and I imagine it's in your professional development coming up, to make sure that teachers and principals adhere to our policy on recess?
Board President Creel, there's a number of things. One is that we've send out and make sure that all principals have their bell schedules and what their times are. We review those. They have to send it back to us that everything looks perfect. That's 1. 2, when we reworked this last year, Elias and I spent a number of hours on it. We made sure that everyone had the correct number of, and they didn't, by the way, of recess in the morning and the afternoon. We recalculated everything after we went back and put those in, and same with if there was any time after lunch, we did the same thing. All that was redone. On tomorrow, we are actually having our first, and we're starting this year, is our new principal PD. So tomorrow we're going to be with them for 3 to 4 hours and go over, again, their budget. We'll be going over their bell times and instructional minutes and that kind of thing. So we will continue to work on that. We also worked on last year and talked because we were in board meetings going over the board policies such as this one, and we always come back to PD, to principal PD, on what happens at board. So, and reinforce our policies and our ARs. So we have been working on that. And I think anyone on cabinet might be able to state that I really believe this is running like clockwork now. I really do believe that. We've made sure that they knew that they can't use this for discipline.
Thank you. We made that very important, so thank you very much. I have just a quick question. Superintendent, the first day of the Leadership Institute, is that Thursday? It's Thursday and Friday all day?
It's Thursday and Friday all day,
Great. Where's it being held this year?
Buffalo Thunder.
Okay, cool.
And it's all being paid for through sponsors.
Fantastic. Thanks for doing that. You're excellent at doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next one is orientation plan for behavioral expectations. This is very common to do at the beginning of the year, where for middle school and high school they have grade assemblies. I did the same thing as a principal, so that must be happening for a million years now. But we set our expectations that first week of school. It's really important. Within elementary, I'm sure it's done by teacher. There might be some things with the principal, but I think typically that's done by teacher. I will have Chanel and Vanessa and I will work on where we are on why the ones are there, so we'll keep working on that, and maybe they're still in the planning stages on how they want to do that. The next one is evacuation plans. We also have a number of things that are due to us in the next week before school starts. One of those is the evacuation plan. It's due on the 3rd, so we'll be getting that from principals. They're already working on it.
And also Mr. Salvidres and his team have been monitoring that. I know
Correct.
that they've been auditing that as well. So there's like cross-functional teaming on some of these.
Correct. And in fact, they have him come out to help them build the evacuation plan, so that he helps, supports them, and we make sure that it's in place. And PED needs safety plans as well. The next one is on teacher materials and supplies. You can see that most feel very good about their supplies went into their budget back in May, so they've spent the summer getting their supplies and materials. I'm not worried about that.
Quick question. Was the state doing anything? They did something several years ago where they gave people a Staples card or something. I can't remember specifically. Are they doing anything this year relative to that?
Mr. Helford, did they do it for this school year, the P card? No. They did not do it this year. I think it's been a little bit of a logistical problem, or they may have not gotten the funding.
Well, it's probably not a priority for them. Teachers never have been. Okay.
So you can see the office supplies. Again, we did give them, we feel a very fair amount for their office supplies. And again, if they run out, we keep working with them through the year. For, I guess, Staples Advantage, that PO is in, and principals can take advantage of that as well. And they look at their budgets continually through the year on their fiscal management site. And the supervisors work with them on that as well to continually look at their budget. I think there's one more, it looks like, on, and I'll take that one for myself, on instructional materials. We have now ordered, as you know, we go through the whole advisory whenever you go through adoption. The adoption this year was health and PE. So they were all involved in an advisory and helped decide what was needed to be ordered. And we've ordered everything for 9th grade health to sports equipment, to Frisbee golf sets, to golf class sets, children's health market in middle school. All that has come to $425,947. All has been ordered. Some of it is already in. What happens then at BF Young, our people start getting it ready for different schools, and that's sent out. They should have everything to them next week. So we'll get that out.
Ms. Cashman and then Mr. Garcia.
On the adoption of health and PE, is that K through 12, or did you just say 9th grade?
Health class is taught at 9th grade, so the adoption is for 9th grade.
PE is for everything?
PE is K-12.
Just on that note, Mr. President, in regard to supplies, and we don't need you don't need to answer this, but what I would like to see next year is what APS does. And actually, you get these huge sponsorships, whether it's Presbyterian, St. Vincent's, St. Christus, St. Vincent's, whatever these huge sponsorships are. And somehow, because I know we have Jeff, and Jeff actually is here to promote the schools, is maybe if he can work on some sort of huge sponsorship so we can actually give out backpacks, school supplies, as APS is doing. You hear that all over the radio all the time. So if we can somehow work on that.
And we do have quite a few, and maybe you might want to talk to that,
Just
Mr.
briefly.
Gephardt, but we do have, some of our partners have provided backpacks to our students. I know that there's, you want to talk to that just briefly? I would love to do more.
Right,
you're
and just
absolutely right.
briefly, because we need to be all over the radio. Or I don't know if some kids in my district even know that we are giving out backpacks, because I didn't know about it.
And then also the kids, are we still doing the incentive for K3+? Do they still get a backpack if they finish?
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Board President Carrillo, members of the board. So we do have a number of things in place through a number of organizations. Joni from the Church of Christ, she has backpacks going all over the district to a number of schools. We have other organizations donating things. I have backpacks in my office right now piled up that Crystal Ibata is sending out to students in need as well. We're not advertising it. But we're doing it, and so maybe what we need to be doing is advertising or promoting it more in what we're doing. It was one of those deals where it was just the right thing to do, and there was a number of organizations that stepped up, and so maybe thanking those organizations and promoting it more is what we need to do.
And then on top of that, the low-income kids primarily that are typically in K3+, although we do have it in non-low-income areas, receive a backpack when they finish K3+. So all of those kids, kindergarten through third grade, get a backpack.
I still have the backpacks my child got from K3+. Also, it's worth noting that Communities in Schools has a back-to-school supply drive going with bins at Del Norte branches right now, so that anyone who wants to contribute can contribute to Communities in Schools or drop off supplies at Del Norte branches, where there are large, colorful bins being in the lobbies for school supply collection.
And then I would say on the sponsorship side, all you have to do is go to athletic events and you can see that Christus St. Vincent is a huge sponsor of uniforms and things for athletics.
Dr. Ryan, you had mentioned to me when you came up that actually, because this is live in real time, so when we meet again on August 7th, you'll see this have changed. But even from when this was PDF'd as a snapshot, he was pointing out to me that some of the things you were talking about, principals were filling in, I guess, right now.
So the dashboard is the front of a workbook that has a sheet for each one of the schools where the departments are communicating. So when we're looking here, because of the work that was done today, some of these have already changed, and comments were put in that could have responded to some of the questions. So it is, and I looked at our dashboard from last year, and we are way ahead of where we were because there's more schools that filled it out. Our scores are better. There were a lot more red in the sheet. So this is a significant improvement over where we were last year, and there are details within this from the principal's perspective and the staff's revised.
Good evening, Board President, Board members, Superintendent. I'm Gabe Romero, Executive Director with Operations. I'll be standing in for Christy Wagner Yonda this evening. Did want to talk a little bit about facility readiness. We have the first portion of that talks about construction and summer improvement projects, whether they're completed and will be ready for opening of school. I do see that there probably a little bit of confusion. We'll probably go ahead and thank you. We'll be able to sort that out probably in the reviews to come, because I do see some NAs and some white boxes that haven't been filled in. But basically, we have some larger summer projects that were taking place, at several different schools, which I'll cover very quickly, and I'll kind of give you a status on those. The Santa Fe High HVAC and lighting upgrades that are taking place at A building and the library is coming along. However, it is going to be kind of to the wire. When teachers come back to school is when our turnover date is from the contractors, which is a few days ahead of when students actually go to school. So I think we have a little bit of a buffer there that we should be okay with. In either case, school's going to start. I have a contingency in place on the very outside chance that that was not to happen, how we would provide cooling to the schools if that was to become an issue. We do have contingencies for all of these. The next large construction project we had over the summer was at El Dorado. That was an HVAC replacement there too, along with some roofing going on there. And it's the same thing. There's a lot of ceiling tiles are removed because they have to access the ductwork and set controls on that ductwork, and they're working in and out of the building, so it does look like it's a little bit of a mess. But on that one too, we're very confident that that will be occurring too. In fact, on both of those, they're starting up the HVAC systems that are on the roof today and tomorrow. So those are already being started up. A couple others, so the soccer field at Santa Fe High School. We have new lighting out there and a new scoreboard. We just need to align some lighting out there and make some adjustments to the scoreboard. Pinon Elementary, there's a playground there.
Since you mentioned
Yes.
Capitol High, lighting, scoreboard, what about bleachers? What's been done about that?
Santa Fe
That's
High
what I meant,
soccer
Santa Fe
field,
High.
yeah. We do have portable bleachers there. We have a couple of sets of portable bleachers that we are assembling and will be ready for the opening.
Terrific.
Okay. And those are fantastic because you can move them and adjust them to the track field or for soccer events or whatever type of event you're
And you'll be
having.
hearing on that point, Mr. President, I think you'll give us the date, maybe I can put it in my announcements at the August 7th board meeting, but we do want to have a grand opening for the soccer field.
Yes.
At Santa Fe High, because there's lighting, there's bleachers, and we want to make it a big deal. You know, we had a soft opening last year, and, you know, it was like we should have done more to make them feel pride that they
Yeah.
got this. So I'll have the date for you for the grand opening of the soccer field.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Ms. Cashman?
Speaking of grand opening of a soccer field, I see that we have somebody from the New Mexican sports page here, so maybe James Barron can cover that for us too and get some publicity. Thanks, James.
Thank you. At Pinon Elementary, we have a large renovation to the playground that's taking place, and the rain did put it behind. There was a little bit of flooding that went on there. Nonetheless, it was understood that not the entire playground will be ready for opening of school. There will be some construction going on about 30% of the playground to make that ready after school begins. So that's been well understood for some time. Lisa Randall's done a fantastic job with our solar arrays. They're all ready. They're awaiting inspection before they can be fully operational, but they are ready to go. And then we have portables at Milagro and Mandela that are some are placed as we speak. They're at Milagro, and then the ones at Mandela are being delivered as we speak, and that's going to be a tight schedule there too, but we're working with the principal to make sure there's accommodations so that when those show up, that we get them ready as soon as possible to start school.
So relative to, and then Rudy, relative to Milagro, obviously the old Capshaw site, I got some calls where people were very upset to all of a sudden see outside their backyard portables. And so it's safe to say that, I mean, I know we have to do it because we have population there, but it's safe to say that those portables at the Zia Street site, they're going to be removed once that term ends and kids move over to the new facility. Is that correct?
President Carrillo, board members, and superintendent, we specifically leased or rented those portables for that purpose so we could easily dispose of them once we're done.
Excellent. Mr. Garcia?
Really quick on those portables, Gabe, so is the electrical pedestal and all that stuff already there? And then that way we can just mount it and then just hook up the pedestal to the existing portable, or we're going to load the portable and then bring in the utilities underground, so on and so forth?
Where we are with the electrical
Just really quick.
supply
Good.
to the portables, I'll have to get back to you on that to give you the specifics on that, but there is that, and there's fire and inspections to go along with that. So I'd have to get back with you on the specifics. Moving.
I just have some questions in regards to the facilities, but after you're done with the spreadsheet, I can ask them.
Thank you. Moving along, as far as all spaces being cleaned.
I was waiting till you were done with seeing if you had touched on these schools. Okay, so Capitol High School, nearing completion, is that correct?
Yes, President Carrillo, there are nearing completion. They've worked out a punch list for small trim items and those sorts of things to finish up the phase that they're currently working on. The next phase won't be for several months.
Okay, and then, and it doesn't need to happen tonight, but I think, and I imagine there's at least 2 other board members that would like this, an update on what's happening at the new Milagro side at Llano Street, because we are 1 year away from moving kids in. And I love driving by there. Like every 3 days I drive by, and it's just amazing what happens, and it's so fun to see it go up. But it'd be great to have an update from maybe the chair or someone on CRC, or you or Ms. Wagner, Yonda Wagner, to let us know what's going on.
It almost looks like an erector set.
It's cool. Very few times you see cranes in Santa Fe, right?
It's moving along beautifully. And
all right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was just the first line. I can go through the next, which relatively quickly. So about the spaces being cleaned and ready for students, typically that takes place right at the end because of everything that's going on in the schools. Right. You want to clean at the very end. That's understandable. And that looks like it's well underway, and we have contingencies for all of that. The only, I think, red areas that I think might be a misunderstanding, we will communicate with those principals, has to do with bathrooms and then custodial supplies in Acequia Madres. So I think it's a communication issue, and we want to ensure, reassure the principal there that will be certainly ready. We have plenty of both at that particular school. And then at Milagro Middle School, same with the bells and alarms working. We certainly have a contractor that is working as we speak to make sure that our clocks and alarms are set, and those we are certain will be ready for the opening of school.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Mr. Garcia?
Just really quick, Gabe, did we have any major flooding on Monday night in any of our schools?
So, good point. That was something that I wanted to mention this evening. So the school buildings itself, we had no structural damage to the schools. They held up very well. However, some of them, because of the civil and the grading, water comes in certain doors because it's lower than the surrounding area, but we were able to mop that up, and maybe some small floor repairs. What was more significant was we had a couple of playgrounds, Gonzales and Chaparral, that were washed out pretty well. So we are working with our playground vendor that will, currently we're working with them to make sure that we mitigate that and restore that as fully as we can before the beginning of the school year. Now, in both of those sites, we're just at the very beginning of trying to work on that. It could go into the beginning of the school year. So we're working hard to make that happen as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romero.
If we could have Dr. Ryan, if you would come up and discuss IT readiness, please.
Okay. IT readiness, we're looking at the printers, internet, student labs, administrative offices, our phones, copying machines, and technology training within the school. IT has just finished walking through each one of the schools. We'll do that a second time right before school starts to make sure that we fully understand and visually can see what problems the schools might be having. Our priority on this walkthrough is to make sure we get our administrative offices, because they're registering, et cetera, and the school labs. There are some classrooms that are having their floors done or carpets cleaned or whatever that we'll have to get in as soon as that's finished, and we'll clean up any connecting of computers or devices at that time. And the, again, the chart compared to where we were last year at this time is much better with much more full, and I think part of that is because of the walkthroughs. Dr. Garcia's stressing that we make sure we have the schools ready. The teams have responded.
Then Ms. Cashman and then me.
And I know you know this, I just want to say it publicly so our teachers are reassured. Copy machines are critical when those teachers get back. They're working overtime, there's a lot of copying that gets done. So I know your staff is looking at that to make sure they're all up, but, you know, can we keep an eye on that? Because, you know, if the teachers can't make the copies that they need for the first week, then it becomes problematic for them.
Board Member Carrillo, but members of the board, Dr. Garcia, we are certainly aware, and as you know, the copiers are all networked now so that the teachers can print from their devices. And our final phase of the ETN phased rollout is completed this year. We've got 3 schools that we're finishing up the PON, the network in the schools for. So that's also a real good news. So the computers are all here. We're all fully staffed up on the number of devices for both students and for staff.
Thank you. I remember Mr. Garcia once bringing up in a board meeting, I don't know if it was a nephew or something, that teacher or a teacher at that point, and I'm sure there may be more than one, that wasn't using the technology or the smart board or things that were made available for whatever reason. Is it being impressed upon principals that when they're checking in with teachers in terms of their readiness, that they both know how to use and are going to use all of this new technology that we're paying millions and millions of dollars for?
President Carrillo, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, several fronts that we're tackling this year. We've identified new principals and new teachers, and we're going out to them to make sure they're trained on and have ongoing training through the year. We now have more we'll be hiring more digital learning coaches as soon as we get our teachers in the classroom filled, but we'll have more of those, so we have a lower ratio of teachers to have to support. And we're working very closely with curriculum instruction and Ms. Sink's team to make sure not only are they using it, but that we can now monitor their use of it so that we can intervene earlier than we have in the past.
Terrific. Thank you.
I want to thank Dr. Ryan and his team. And as we go through all of this, I do want to mention that this team, for the most part, with a few very minor tweaks, we've been together for 2 years. And, you know, the more that we've been able to build more system and infrastructure, you know, we're striving for continuous improvement. And I really feel like it's starting to show on the operations end of it, that teamwork and people supporting each other. There's a tremendous amount of teamwork on this team, and I'm very proud of them for that. So thank you, Dr. Ryan, and all of you thus far. Is Salvidres there? He is. He always tells me I'm working in my office, and I'll be right there, right on cue. Mr. Salvidres.
President Carrillo, board members, Superintendent Dr. Garcia, good afternoon, good evening. Excuse me. So regarding the safety and security of the schools, on the dashboard, you'll see that it has some yellows, some greens, and some reds. And I'll explain a little bit about those. We'll start off with first the yellows, the first segment of that, which is the portion of, school administrators understand emergency protocols. It is my opinion that they should be at about 50% there, because not all teachers are back, nor all staffing members are back. Although some principals feel that they're a little higher than that, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. That's their practice. They believe that they're confident that they can get on the ball or right on day number 1, ready to go. So I left those at 2. So that's at 57%. We look at security guards, crossing guards, positions, and so forth. As you'll see there, we have such as Academy, and a few others there that are in the red, and I'll explain this to you. So regarding the crossing guards, we have Milagro, who's down by 1 crossing guard right now. Carlos Gilbert is down by 3. Cesar Chavez is down by 1. El Camino Real is down by 1, and Wood Gormley is down by 2. Those are crossing guards. I'm confident, though, that we should probably be very close to be fully staffed by the first day of school. Currently speaking to the crossing guard company.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So is this now the inverse of what the other was? In terms of the chart itself? Because you said Wood Gormley was down by 2, but I'm looking at Wood Gormley and crossing guards, and it says 2. So does that mean that have you flipped the metric again, or?
No, sir. The last update I did this to, it was at noontime. For some reason, some of those numbers have changed again. Again, it's a dynamic document that should not have changed because the status still is currently. Wood Gormley is down by 2 crossing guards.
Does that mean that this would normally be red and have a 0 in it?
President Creel, members of the board, Dr. Garcia, the scoring for this is the same. It's done, it's green. If there's a plan to finish it, this has nothing to do with the number of FTEs. This isn't a...
Okay, if it's green, it's done. If it's yellow,
If
it
green,
needs
it's
help,
done.
and
If
if
it's yellow,
red-
there's a plan. If it's red, it hasn't been addressed yet.
Well, then, okay, so then that would beg the question, because you just mentioned Wood Gormley, it's done, but now you're saying it needs 2.
Wood Gormley
Well, how-
should be a 1 at minimum right now because we do not have the crossing guards. Wood Gormley does not require security guards.
So what he is saying, and this is what Ms. Sink was talking about earlier, okay? This is a dynamic process, and as the numbers come in, I mean, we could have principals that report green, 2 on everything, and yay, rock and roll, ready to go. We have to verify. We have to communicate. Sometimes someone might have an error put in that number, or maybe they thought they had the 2 and they've lost the position and he has information that they don't have.
Okay.
So what we don't have right now, because this would have been moving and jumping around, so that's why we took a snapshot to show you. If we were live, we could go to the Wood Gormley tab, and there would be comments there. There would be comments from the principal and comments from Mr. Salvidres. So somewhere in there, she probably thought she had 2, she doesn't. And so he's just telling you, even though it's green, it really isn't. So
Okay, well, that's why I was wondering about the matter. I just want to make sure that,
You got it.
got it.
You're right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a good clarification. I apologize. Like I said, they feel confident it's there. I'm working on getting the resources they need for the first day of school.
Okay, then on crossing guards, and I don't, is Rudy still there? Yeah. I remember there was a big kerfuffle, I'll use that word. That was, remember, nobody here remembers. Remember Mel Morgan? You would remember Mel, Ms. Price? He always used the word kerfuffle. Who's paying for crossing guards right now? Because I know there was this back and forth with the city.
So,
I don't remember.
President Carrillo, board members, Superintendent Garcia, I can speak to a certain part of that. I know that we have a contract with the city, an MOU with the city that's renewed yearly, which they will reimburse the school district, if I'm not mistaken, up to $178,000 of the actual cost of the crossing guard. Then the school district will go ahead and pay the remaining balance. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Hofford can explain, I think we received somewhere close to $150,000 for last year's cost, if I'm not
That's
mistaken.
what we paid, and they reimbursed us for the 178.
They reimburse the one up to 178 of the actual cost.
Right. Okay, and then what our cost was then roughly, spitball it. Well, either way, it doesn't matter. They should pay for the whole thing. I mean, that's not, I mean, they really should. That's something that, those are their streets, these are their kids, also, right? So I'd like us to look at that again, because every 150,000 counts, and I really think that that needs to fall on them. So when it comes to next year,
I want to clarify something, Mr. Halford, because what I heard you say we pay up to $178,000, and we got reimbursed for $150. That would lead me to believe that we didn't utilize the whole
is that what you said?
$178. But is that correct?
I thought I heard that we had to pay 150. They paid one,
Yeah.
like the total being 328.
Superintendent Garcia, Board President Carrillo, currently we've billed and received about $158,000. We're in the process of doing the final billing, which hopefully will bring us closer to that amount. In years past, we've billed for the entire amount.
Bottom line, did we pay anything out of operational for it, or did they pay it all?
We may have paid a portion of some of the salaries, like, for example, the safety coordinator.
About how much? 25,000, 50,000, 100,000, a
Probably
million?
around 75 to 100,000.
Okay, thank you. I would just like us to look to have them pay the entire bill in the future. Yes, Mr. Garcia.
Just really quick, since we're in cross guards, can you just really quick, who's responsible for the lighting in the school zones?
Depending, President Carrillo, Board Member Superintendent Garcia, that's depending on the county or the city, wherever it lies. So I speak to either Mr. John Romero or the person responsible in the county to help me with the lights.
And will we actually turn on the lights a week before school starts to get people in the swing of things that this is a school zone?
Acclimated to it, yes, we can definitely do, and we can, we're looking at the scheduling to make sure that they're correct. I have received some concerns about the lighting schedules, and I've already addressed it with Mr. Romero from the city to go ahead and start with that.
Thank you. Is it also possible to get with the police department, just to have a couple of units out there during the first 2 or 3 days at different schools?
So I already spoke to Deputy Chief Valdez yesterday, asked him if he had a plan in place for an operational plan for the first day of schools, which is hectic. We already know that. People have to learn to drive. They're all in a rush. And he did say that they were planning to have special operations and close patrols for at least a couple of weeks at the school zones.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. On the other part that this might have a yellow and not fully green, or might be red, is our security guards. Currently, we have a total of 6 vacant security guards. Academy, Bridge, and Engage, which is Abe, is still missing 1 security guard. Santa Fe High School has allocated 7 security guards. They have 6 out of 7, so they're down by 1. Milagro is down by 1. They're allocated 2. Aspen is down by 1. They have 1 security guard assigned to them. El Camino Real is assigned 1 as well. And Nino Otero is assigned by 1. I apologize, I have to do a mistake. It's actually 7. And I'll tell you why it's 7 and not 6. Because Aspen and El Camino Real decided to use their own budgeting operational budget to staff for a full guard. They went ahead and paid for the full guard. They were sharing a guard that the district was paying for. We would pay for a full-time, and we'd give it to them 50-50, so 20 hours a week for each school. They wanted a full-time security guard, so they staffed it at $26,000. Roughly, it costs about $23,000 on regular, and they went ahead and budgeted a $26,000 cost for them. That freed up our budget side to have an extra security guard, so I requested 1 security guard for Gonzales Elementary, and middle K through 8, who had not had 1 before, yet all the other K through 8s had. So they'll benefit from that move from the school budgeting for that guard, and we can move somewhere.
That would beg the question, why the SAC and the school decided they need an additional guard, and it's $26,000, and if they're taking that money from whatever their budget to pay for that guard, what are they not funding? Whether it's a nurse or whether it's a counselor, or I'm wondering what is their logic behind wanting more security versus if they already have a number of guards, then something like nursing or counseling or an EA or something like that.
Which school specifically are we talking about?
That was Aspen and El Camino Real.
So, Ms. Sink, you were in on those meetings, as was Mr. Halford. Do you know specifically the decision to allocate additional funding for a security guard?
It is in the spreadsheet. It's in there for security guard, approximately $26,000 and some change.
And it could be, Mr. Romero, do you remember at that point in time when those allocations were made, was that made at the district level? Because I don't think that those come from their budget. I think that's from the district allocation. I don't think that that's coming from them, but I could be wrong. Mr. Romero, please.
Superintendent, Board President, and Board members, previously it was the district that, out of operational costs, that paid for the security officers. I think last year and probably this year there was some flexibility for the schools to reallocate some funding for different positions, and some had elected to. I don't know if any elected to last year, but I know some were considering providing additional funding so they could have additional security at their school.
So I'm not certain what, maybe it was an EA, maybe it was in supplies. I really don't know what was reallocated to make it happen within their budget, but again, goes back to site-based, the SACs, et cetera, et cetera. So again, it goes back to that discussion. And we can look into those two schools and see what their reasoning was behind it. Ms. Zink?
Is your hand up?
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Noble?
And just to say, we do have the system that we do, and my guess would be, and I know those schools reasonably well, that they prioritize, particularly in light of recent events, having security guards. And you know, it may not be such a neat thing that they cut an EA or something like that. They may have cut bits and pieces here and there in order to make that up. But I can understand with those K-8s, and I appreciate with Gonzalez as a K-8 as well, and given some of the security concerns that we've been talking about here, that those schools made it a priority to have security guards full-time.
Thank you.
Okay. President Carrillo, Board Member, Superintendent Garcia, the last couple of items there is the Raptor system, which is a visitor system. That's been installed.
Actually, I think we missed a couple. We missed security equipment working.
Oh, I
and then
apologize.
we have the attendance support teams, which Mr. Gephardt's going to speak to.
Correct. So the security equipment working, we did our safety audits last year. We found any problems and concerns. We asked for corrections on the repairs. They're ready to go. Nothing concerning with starting school. And the next portion, it will be Mr. Cart and Jeff Hart.
Thank you.
Board President Carrillo, members of the board. So the section on attendance, support teams, and truancy protocols in place, that's regarding are the people and the systems in place at the schools to ensure fidelity in the reporting of absences. If absences aren't reported correctly, it could show up as a truancy situation, as an unexcused absence, making sure that the absences are identified as excused and unexcused, and having the people in place. And so as you can see, most of them are twos in that regard. And so we are working with the schools in yellow to ensure that their secretaries or their personnel are trained in properly identifying absences in that regard.
So truancy was last year, is in Mr. Gephardt's wheelhouse. And then you also led the effort on the Raptor. So do you guys want to talk about that together?
Can we stay on truancy for 1 second?
Of course.
So let's just say a kid misses 26 of a particular class. And then, there's another class where it's 16 of the same kid. 26 of one class, 16 of another, 11 of another. And there's no recollection by the parents of receiving any letters whatsoever from anyone about this kid's lack of desire to go to school.
Right, so if the absences are reported with fidelity.
They're in Power School.
And so they're in there, it's linked to the A2A system, and the letters are generated automatically.
Well, they're not being generated well. So I'd ask somebody to maybe follow up on that, because I know other parents who have asked me about that. And the kids they've gotten great grades anyway, but they've just chosen that there are particular classes they didn't feel like they needed to attend. And so I think that should be followed up on. Because if I was a parent of one of those children, I'd be really upset.
Right, I'll take a look into that, because that is part of the process, is making sure that not only the system's in place, but they're working properly. So I'll take a look at that. Yes. And then as for the Raptor, Mario Salbidres and
I'm sorry, I missed a hand. Ms. Noble.
Just to say, I get the letters, and I don't like them because they make me feel like a delinquent parent. But I do keep my child home when he's sick and that sort of thing. And I actually had 2 emails last year of people telling me that they pulled their children from the Santa Fe Public Schools for feeling like they were about to be referred to CYFD because they were getting so many letters. So I don't know how we balance this, but I certainly know that the letters go out, and I receive them more than I'd like to.
Ms. Price?
As a former principal and assistant principals, the kids get home before the parents and they get to the mail.
Oh, that's right.
This is reality.
All right, that's... Yeah.
Okay, so then on to Raptor. Mario Salvidres and I teamed on this. Our departments teamed on it. And what you're seeing there is the twos are in place because our new electronic visitor management system, our sign-in procedure at the schools and all the district offices, the equipment has been installed, the software has been installed, it's been checked and tested through Ryan's team. And we are currently training secretaries on the use of the system. We did that today. Principals later this week. Communications with parents. It's on our website. It's going out through social media. We have new ID badges for all district staff that have barcodes, so they simply just scan it. They don't have to worry about signing in when they go into buildings. Once we work through the initial rollout, it's going to be much more user-friendly. It's going to ensure that we know who's in our buildings, and it's going to be one more layer of protection to keep our students and staff safe. So we are rolling that out in a very strategic way after piloting it at a few sites earlier in the year.
I'd like to add to that, that the training that's gone on, and there's a whole document, if someone is flagged, how that is handled discreetly. We don't want to embarrass anybody. How do we ensure, if it's a false read? So was training this already with the secretaries. There'll be training at the Leadership Institute, correct? There'll be a whole section on that. But we want to be very sensitive to that. And then also, Mr. Bernardino, while it's on my mind, we need new badges with barcodes for them so that they have it for the schools, okay? Thank you.
And if I could just add one last thing to that. So that is stressed. If you go to the website and you see the videos, we stress over and over how our parents are welcome in our buildings. And we stress during the trainings how to handle those situations in a very discreet manner, knowing that we want that parent engagement. We want parents in our building. And the last step to this is going to be Maggie Romero and Sabra Romero, no relation. They're actually going to the school sites to work with each individual secretary and principal so they could go through these scenarios and ensure that we are handling these situations in a very discreet manner, in an appropriate manner, so that we don't look like we're putting up a wall, because we want that engagement.
And just a question on the barcode. So if you swipe, a teacher swipes their barcode, that will get them into any building in the district or only into their particular school site?
So this, the way this works is any building in the district, I can go and I can check into that building. Now, this isn't an access card. This doesn't unlock the doors or anything. This is just when the IT support staff or the maintenance staff or district staff, when we visit a school, we still have to find the right binder. We have to sign in. Well, from now on, all we do is doot, and then we're signed in.
Okay, but it doesn't give you access.
It just signs you into their
It does-
system.
Okay, thank you.
Does it really make that doot noise?
It actually does. It's just like that. So I can show you the video. But I actually had to act out the video for a little while earlier at the secretary's retreat when we had tech problems. I could do the whole thing for you if you'd like.
No, actually, so thank you for putting in the Raptor and the Rhino for those people that are out there, parents of the district. What that is the actual door locks that we actually have at every single school. So they're actually almost at 100% placed in there.
So, and Mario Salvidres will speak to the Rhino.
Right. And also thank you for the Raptor also.
And then hold on, Ms. Cashman?
And I just want to, Board Member Garcia reminded us that we already have our new ID cards, so you don't have to get the board.
Actually, you don't. You
Oh,
don't have
these
the
are-
barcode.
Yeah,
Oh, you
it
do?
does.
Do we get them the barcodes already? They've given us 2 IDs. Oh, so you guys already did it?
So
I'm
I'm just
so
saying,
proud
I'm
of you.
trying to not make you do any
Thank you.
extra
I
work.
didn't know that we had gotten them the
Thank you.
barcodes. Fabulous. Wow, well-oiled machine. Thank you.
Okay, and so the final item is the Rhinoware. As you see there, Academy Bridge, A basically what we call it, does not have it right now. That's a private building, so we haven't gotten authorization from the owner of the building to install it. We don't know if he or she's gonna want it installed in that building, so we'll cross that bridge as soon as we get there. Right now, we're in the progress of installing still. Zio Behavioral is also needing some, it's going to be minimal there. And here, there's an error, and I want to note it. Nino Otero is not a 2, but again, maybe I had a conversation with the principal last week on Friday through via email, and I advised that their school is in the process of possibly next week getting started to install, so that's why they may believe that it's good to go. But the installer is looking at late next week to start with Nino Otero. So after that, if there is a need to continue to install the RhinoWare, it will occur after school hours, so 5 o'clock till midnight, so they're not in the way of the educational process with the children.
Mr. Garcia and then Ms. Cashman.
I just have one really remark for Jeff. But then this is going back, Jeff, to the Raptor. I've heard from a couple of school bus drivers that actually it is not working in their buses and it has not worked in a while. So if you can just look into that.
Board President Carrillo, members of the board. The Raptor system is just in the schools, and that's just a sign in at the front, and all district buildings, but that's, I don't know, I'd have to reach out to the bus drivers or transportation and figure out what exactly that's it. Maybe, is that the rolling study hall Wi-Fi, or maybe?
No, actually, it's regarding the IDs, and I found it kind of hard to believe that every single student has to run an ID through the bus, but he said his hasn't, right. Well, there's something in it, if you can just look in it, there's something inside of his bus, or their bus, or her bus, that actually has something to do with an ID, if you can just look into it.
Go ahead.
Board President, Superintendent, and Board Member Garcia. Previously, there was a system that they tried to put in place that would track the students. It was probably a little bit before its time for some reason. I think that's probably what the bus drivers are confused with. This has nothing to do with that process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Cashman and then Superintendent.
Thank you so much for, over the summer, getting those Rhino door locks installed. And so just to remind the public, this is to provide an extra layer of protection into our classrooms. So if we go into a lockdown, the teachers will be trained, and it would be very difficult to get into that classroom once those locks are deployed. But just a quick question, were we able to, I see that it's green for El Dorado, so we were able to work out something at El Dorado because Representative McQueen had given us the money, but we were able to accelerate that, because I think we had that discussion before that we couldn't pre-install them, so we were able to do something.
Well, we did get them installed. I'm not certain, Vice President Cashman, how, I'd have to, and I don't know if Mr. Romero is up to speed on that, because, you know, how those dollars are dealt with. There was a special appropriation, but did we use Mr. Representative McQueen's dollars, or was that out of operational?
Superintendent, President, and board members, we did use operational funds or school funds to go ahead and proceed with that because of the lengthening process for capital outlay. We will try and recover those expenses if it falls within the guidelines, so that we might be able to recover those costs and expend. But we didn't want to make them the last just so that we could go into the school year without those locks. So we thought it was most prudent to go ahead and get it done.
So just really quick on that, we won't be able to recover those funds because we don't have a signed grant agreement. We've already expended the dollars on that. So maybe if you want to talk to Representative McQueen, he could get that money reauthorized this year for some other appropriation for El Dorado. That'd probably be a good idea.
Exactly.
That's what I was thinking. So we will work on that before the session. No, this was part of his pork, not part of that other allocation.
And you had more.
I just wanted to say thank you to everybody and to Mr. Salvides for his work on this. And I had the opportunity to present at New Mexico School Boards in July regarding, I was on a panel on school safety and on arming teachers, which we have no interest in. But I just want to commend the board for all of the things that Santa Fe Public Schools has in place. We are so far ahead of other districts. It is just really amazing when you speak to other districts, from perimeter fencing, the extra vestibule, the panic buttons, the cameras, the alarm systems, single point of entry, on and on and on and on and on and on, all the things that you should have in place. The only thing we don't have are SROs. I don't know that we'd ever, but other than that, the district is just so far ahead. And I don't think people are aware of that. So when I share that, they're like, wow, we had no idea Santa Fe was that far advanced. And I know Miss Terry's out there, but I think it's important for the public to know how far this district is. I'm so proud of what we have in place for our kids.
And then, so the presentation is over, and I want to thank you, but I have questions about different parts, some notes. Rudy, you had your hand up?
I know the presentation's over, and I just want to thank the superintendent and her staff. Thank you very much for getting us to where we are at this point. I actually heard from a couple of board members that we are a lot more ahead than we actually were in the last 2, 3, 4 years. So thank you for you and your team for working to getting an early jump start on the first day of school. And I would also like to see somehow, I think Santa Fe Public Schools are great. And how do we get that word out there to the parents and say, look, this is why you should come to Santa Fe High. I don't know if it's putting an ad in the paper. I don't know what we need to do. And so we just need to somehow promote our schools and put some sort of an ad a week or two before school starts to say, this is why you should come to Santa Fe Public Schools. Also, it's unfortunate that we actually read in the paper yesterday or today that New Mexico once again is 50th in education, which is kind of sad and kind of heartbreaking. And hopefully with the new administration, we can actually get our schools back to par and where we need to go. So I also think an ad in the paper would actually help out for that. Thank you.
All right, we're not on board discussion yet. We're still on the presentation and questions related to it. Ms. Cashman?
Just one thing that's missing from the presentation, so maybe on Tuesday night's meeting, is transportation. Are our buses and the bus schedules ready to go? Because as board members, we get that. And
so would it be staffing, because we still have the same number of buses that we've had in the past?
Do we have
are the bus drivers on the staffing list?
Oh, you did? Oh, okay, I missed it, so they're, oh, okay. Okay, great.
Oh, but I think that Ms. Cashman's also asking about staffing relative to drivers, all that, because I know that's sometimes really hard for us.
Has that been on the checklist before? So we can
Well, nutrition should be on the, all those, right?
Well, they are following up with those. Mr. Romero, can you, you don't necessarily have to do it tonight, but when we have board review tomorrow, but if we can plan on the 7th, Dr. Ryan, we need to, on the HR section, because they pretty much handle it though, but the bus drivers and your food services workers, if we can add those 2 line items, okay?
And janitorial and maintenance, that's missing.
I think, because, yeah, well,
Okay,
it's never been there, but
All
we'll
right.
add it.
Okay. Did you have additional questions?
I'm good.
Okay, so actually, you're so close to the mic, Mr. Bernardino. So I know that we've brought this up a lot over the last couple years, and I know that we're hiring a lot of staff. Onboarding, what are we doing? If you don't have the answer tonight, that's fine. You can have it on the 7th. Specifically, what are we doing in terms of when we get new hires, what onboarding do they go through? What do we do to make them feel a part of the community? What do we do to give them a buddy? If that's what you're doing.
I would like to address that, but I don't think we'll have it on the 7th. I don't want to put his time on that
All right,
right
that's
now.
fine. 21st is fine,
We'll
whatever.
But
Okay.
we will do it.
Okay.
And there's a whole bunch, I think, that Linda Singh talked a bit about it a little bit on mentoring, what we're doing with the principals, the budding system, on and on and on. So we will, and then there's some basic onboarding that happens when people are hired. There's training videos that they have to see and so on. So we can do that, a couple of weeks from now.
That's
But
fine. Even if it's next month, or not next month, but even if it's September.
You got it.
And, but if you could include in that quality of life things relative to onboarding, because when Susan and I met with those folks from Pauhegan, Wisconsin, that was something they were super successful at. Pauhegan, yeah. And that was probably like 3 years ago. Pewaukee, that's it. Pewaukee. You- Pewaukee.
They won the Baldrige. They're a continuous improvement school. I've met with that superintendent. We actually implement a lot of quality improvement strategies. I don't label it that because people don't like Baldrige, but we do PDSAs on many
Great.
of our processes because we are on a continuous improvement
Okay.
trajectory.
On subs, I know that we're doing what we can to reach out to even retirees to maybe take spaces temporarily so that there is an experienced teacher in front of a classroom as opposed to a full-time sub. I'm wondering, are we staffed on subs? You know, in order for them certainly to take full-time if they have to, but even part-time, how are we staffed on subs right now?
Board member, Board President Carrillo, board members, we have, when I looked at the report about 3 days ago on Saturday, we have 427 substitutes. Out of those, we have 288 that are what we consider continuously active. What that means is they're taking at least 6 assignments in 1 month. We have a lot, and within the substitutes, we have various categories, which is a teacher, licensed teacher, substitutes with a degree, and then substitutes without a degree, and there's a mix of all of those.
On that point, we analyze the data. We have some schools that have difficulty getting subs. Some of that is our leadership issues. Some of that is middle schools have the most trouble because people, that's a breed of their own. And people who choose to work in middle schools, who choose to supervise middle schools, it's difficult. And so Ortiz and Milagro tend to be a challenge to staff for middle schools.
I remember once when I worked at DeVargas, didn't mean to interrupt you, I subbed at DeVargas, and a couple of times. And I remember after the third time, Diane, I think, was the principal at that. It was when we were having a lot of challenges over there before I was on the board. And I said, I'm never going back to that school. There's just no way. And I didn't like having to say that. This was probably like 2010 or something, but no, it was really hard.
So we're looking at that and looking at, okay, and when you hear about our team, our different approach to how we're doing supervision, how do we work with the principal and that staff to make it a more inviting climate for subs to want to go there? I too did not like to take middle school assignments when I was subbing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bernardino. So I have a question about Engage. So Engage, and this is what's piqued my interest, was not in the Back to School book, by the way, that was very good, in the New Mexican. So all of you putting that together, it was really stellar. But I didn't see Engage listed as the schools, and that prompted me to go to the Engage website, where Teresa Baca is still listed as the principal. And I'm curious, and then we haven't talked about Engage much, but it's a very successful program. I know we've talked about combining Engage, Lerigorte, and Bridge in terms of location, but what is happening with Engage in what recruitment efforts for kids? Because the school pays for itself.
Well,
So-
it does, and actually, they graduated more kids this year from Engage than
Super
they have.
exciting, I know.
Yes, and Dr. Sanchez has done an amazing job. She is the principal of all three. The downside for Engage for us, it's a great service to the community. It's a great service for kids. Is that those kids come to us, they're 18 to 23. They have 5 credits. We want to make sure that they have more credits if they're going to be engaged because they would be better off going to a GED program. They used to be in there where they would go a whole year and get a half a credit. We've changed that. If you're going to be in there, we're going to accelerate you and we're going to move you through. They always count for us as zeros because they don't graduate in time. So it actually statistically, it brings our grad rate down. It doesn't help us, but we're doing a great service to the community.
So it's still operating as an independent school, a drop-in school, if you will?
It's still an independent
Okay.
school, but it's not as casual as it used to be.
All right.
If you're going to be there,
Accountability, that's good. Okay, you might
we
want to
can
just
do a
make a
report.
little note to update the website.
Thank you for pointing that
Yeah.
out. We will.
And then, because I know Ms. Sanchez does a wonderful job. Dr. Sanchez, sorry. They work hard for that. You're right, absolutely. So I would like, if somebody from the CRC, is Cliff still here? No. But it'd be nice probably to have a report sooner rather than later from the CRC as to what's happening with ECO. And, because a lot of things were discussed over the last couple of years, and I'm curious as to, in terms of the development and planning. I know that something that was brought up was the possible rebranding eventually when the new site is built out. I know it was brought up and agreed to by a lot of people at the table, as well as the people that were from admin at the table, that whether it's at ECO or Santa Fe High School, that there needs to be a healthcare pathway at ECO or Santa Fe High School.
So, I mean, this is,
Just putting these little seeds out.
right, I know, but we're not on board
This is on
discussion.
dashboard. So I guess on a dashboard, there's no little line item for that in your dashboard.
ECO should be on there.
No, I know ECO's on there, but
For
in
start of
terms
the
of,
school. I mean,
okay,
Can we
I'll
just
bring it up in another venue.
Yeah, please,
Got it.
thank you.
Thank
Got
you.
it. That's fine. And so, does anyone have any more questions on the presentation? So before we go to board discussion, we're going to hear from the two young men that have been incredibly patient, right? Yeah, it's okay. We're very happy that you're here. Or the three people that I guess are speaking, is it three? Okay. And thank you for coming and thank you for your patience. I don't think you need to read it again, the guidelines.
We read it.
Basically, just be nice and don't go over 3 minutes.
We need a timer on you, I think. Just kidding.
I don't think so.
Just playing. Come here, introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Carlos. Oh, yeah.
Tell them your last name, too.
My name is Carlos Quintana. And, I like, how can I start?
Tell them how you feel.
Alright, so this is how I feel about this thing. I don't think it's fair that anybody can get punished for, I don't think it's fair for anybody to get punished because of another person for being disrespectful or like disrupting or cussing or cursing or like at players or refs or all that. I don't think it's fair because players work in class, we work on the court day and night, and for another adult to get another adult to do something ridiculous and to hurt like another kid that's didn't do nothing but just working to do something for his outlet. So I don't think it's really fair for another like top player to get kicked off the team just because of an adult doing something that's disrespectful that the player doesn't have to deal with. It's not the player's fault. Like it's like it's not really. It's like, in other words, it's not fair because I'm a player myself, and let's say my mom said that she started cussing or something and I get kicked off the team, but that's not my fault because she's the one that did it. I don't think it's fair because if I would be hurt and this is my outlet, so I would be kind of hurt if she did it and I got kicked off the team because she's the one that either yelled at the ref or started blabbering her mouth or throwing stuff on the court for no reason, and I'm the one that gets punished for it. And I don't have any right to get kicked off the team because I'm not the one that's doing all this, and I'm just out there working in class and working on the court to have a better life in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Which school do you attend?
I'm going to Santa Fe High. I'm going to be a freshman this year.
Excellent. Thank you.
So
we're a
I'm
friendly group if you want to talk to us.
Yeah.
Just because we're up here doesn't mean we bite or anything.
Right, come on.
Actually, Rudy sometimes does.
Come
But
on. Tell him your name. Thank you.
My name is Cruz Probst. I attend Milagro Middle School. I don't play basketball. I don't think it's right that if, like, my mom cusses someone out, it's like my issue. It should be hers. It's dumb, to be honest with you. It shouldn't even be like something, but that's brought up. That's it.
Tell them what your schedule's like when you guys have basketball practice and how hard you work.
We wake up at 5 in the morning. We have practice at 6 in the morning, and we have games during the day. Pretty much, we have to attend like different things for to help keep our grades up. And I think they changed it to you have to have no Fs. So it's just motivating everybody else to have good grades and also play good. So that's it. So it shouldn't be our punishment for other people's actions. That's it.
Thank you. Good job. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're right. Their schedule is really long every day, and it's not fair.
Can you say your name for the record, Mel?
Andrea Probst. So Cruz is my son, and Carlos is my other son. Yeah. He's part of our family. And they work really hard, and they're really upset about what they read. So I hope you'll rethink that whole thing that you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Oh, and by the way,
yes.
We only have a nurse part-time at Milagro, because there's a lot of times there's nobody in there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Miss, what's her name? Hummingbird. Beeswax. Hummingbird, she's there, but she's not always there, and there's not somebody else there. I think you had mentioned that there's an assistant. So I'm pretty active at the school, and I'm there a lot, because Carlos was there in 8th grade last year. Yeah, so I don't think that that's quite true. And also, Santa Fe High, they're having a 3-day jump start, and they've been sending out a lot of good information that I appreciate, so I hope that it's good and beneficial. And about those letters, you should just save the letters, because on Power School, you get alerted when they're not in class or they're late. Save it and pay for your crossing guards or something else, because I agree with you. Not a good thing. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And so the next item then on board discussion is parent code of conduct. So the first thing I would say before all of you leave is we don't write the headlines for the newspapers. I mean, the text of the article was not as extreme, but that headline, the headline was very extreme, and the headline's also what caused all of the television media outlets to want to come up here yesterday. So it was just kind of crazy. But it's the editor that does the headline, and they do it so people buy papers. But we heard you loud and clear, I promise. Okay? And the others that spoke earlier. My pleasure. So the reason I put this on here is because I brought it up first, I believe, like last March or April. And because I know there are guidelines, let me look at my notes. Ms. Clayton, yeah, you had spoken about, administrative support, NMAA guidelines, parental contracts. All of that pretty much exists, but it's not what we call in policy or codified, right? So it can be, and that's why I wanted this on the agenda, so that we could then direct the superintendent to codify that stuff. So that, okay, the severity, I mean, if somebody is cussing, you don't actually cuss as much as your kids made us lead to believe or something, did you? No, I know that. So, no, I know that. And I'm looking forward to see you play basketball over there. And, but there's obviously steps that happen, but it needs to be written down, and parents need to sign off on it. And consequences are based on what they did. So obviously, if somebody dared to bring a weapon, then they're going to be probably banned for life from coming on campus to any athletic event. Or if someone started a fight. But if someone's swearing at a ref, yeah, then it's just as Mr. Chavez said in the newspaper, they're probably going to be giving a stern talking to, and said, look, this happens again. But the main thing is, it needs to be written down. I personally believe, and I know that I said to the papers that, yeah, I mean, when I was thinking of this, I was thinking of, you go from slap on the wrist to taking away what is absolutely, positively the most important thing to the parent, and that's the ability to see their kid play. It was just throwing all these things on the wall to see if what stuck. There was no intention of the board or me to say that, okay, this is going to be the thing that's the most extreme, because you boys are absolutely right. Your dad robs a liquor store, you're not the one going to jail. You should not have to be held responsible for your parents or even other adults' extreme behavior. And I can say that Rudy attends a lot of sports. Do you? Yeah, Rudy does. I attend like a ton of sports because I love it. And I can tell you there's been many, many instances where I'm just appalled at the behavior of someone near me, and, you know, I'm not big enough to take them out or say anything to them, or, you know, that's what we have security for. But it's basically getting it on paper so parents and kids and just adults that love to attend games understand the rules and the consequences, because there's been an uptick of this all over the country. And I personally believe it's because of what's going on in our country in the very, very tippy top, where people think they have license to behave in a way that parents would never, ever support, right? So anyway, I thank you both, all of you, three of you, very much for coming tonight. And then, so that's why this is on here. It's basically to say, hey, superintendent, would you please, you know, put in policy and come up with, doesn't have to be on the 7th. It should be probably by the beginning of September, because sports is starting. But
we actually had discussed this earlier, which I had said you had asked me for this, and we've reviewed policy, and we actually have a presentation for the 7th.
okay, that's great.
If
And
that's what the board wants, it's up to you.
does the board? Yes, Ms. Cashman.
Well, I'd like to hear what our athletic director has to say, if that's allowable. But the thing that I looked at is based on what was reported in the paper. We already have 2 board policies, policy 608, which are visitors to school campuses and other district-owned property, and policy 609, conduct on school premises. And so I'm not sure we need another policy. I remember when my daughters played athletics for Santa Fe High and in middle school at Capshaw. You know, when we signed the agreement, the athletic agreement, you know, we were signing it too as parents, you know, and the coaches said, this is what we expect of parents. I mean, everything from you're not allowed to transport your kid to an athletic event. So I'm not sure we need this, and I would definitely, definitely not think that a child should be responsible for their parents' behavior. That's just, if my daughters came up to me and said, Mom, I don't like what you're doing, well, we're going to have a different type of discussion. And so, you know, I don't expect any kid. And for some of our kids, if their parents are volatile, the athletics gives them an outlet with our coaches that are supposed to be non-volatile and give good behavior. And so we don't want to create problems within the families, especially for those kids. So I would not be in support of any kid being responsible for their parents' behavior. It's the other way around. Parents are responsible for their kids' behavior, but not that. So I wouldn't ever consider that we would implement anything like this for athletics. I think what Mr. Chavez said in the paper, I agree. There's a way to handle it. And, you know, but I think we have 2 policies already by the board that call out even more than just athletics. It's what happens when you're on our school property, and if you do these certain things, you can be barred from our school properties. So, but I'd like to hear what Mr. Chavez has to say.
And so, you know, what I was meaning is specific to athletic events and consequences, because we have a lot of policies, but it's the consequence piece that's missing. Rudy, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Are we going to go down the line, or are we going to listen to Mr. Chavez?
Well, we're the board, so if you had your hand up, you can, you know, ask a question for, okay.
Ready?
Yes.
Yep. Larry Chavez, District Athletic and Activities Director. So we also have a third policy, Vice President Cashman, policy 112, which is also civility. So what we do is we also try to be proactive. We try to talk to all the parents at the preseason meetings. That's our time to educate them. Really set the standards, set expectations, and really let them know what we have in place, not only in athletics, but district-wide. In the most severe cases, whenever we have to ban somebody from an athletic event, the NMAA was very adamant and clear today that they will jump on board with us, support our decision, and not only can we ban them from Santa Fe Public School activities, if it gets that severe, they'll jump on board and ban them from any activities statewide. So this is more of a spectator, and that's the way I want to call it, spectator, because if it is a highly attended event, less than 30% of the people will be parents. So we're actually looking at a larger group. And to be able to make that connection to somebody who's misbehaving to an athlete is very slim. So if we can look at it at a larger scope, that's the way we need to take the approach. But what we've tried to do, and we've done that this school year, is really set a good tone. If we see that behavior is starting to escalate, I would go over there and have a conversation with them very quietly. That way we're not causing a scene. That way we're addressing the issue and they know that we're watching. Have we had to have those conversations in our offices? Yeah, we absolutely have. They're not fun, but it's part of the job. What I did see after we've had those conversations, those parents have corrected the behavior. Whenever we've set those expectations for them to attend an event, they have followed through with my requirements, sent me the information that I've asked for, and they are allowed to continue.
Could you clarify, please, though, that we're talking about the NMAA online sportsmanship course, and they have to show that they've been certified. And those, it's not a huge problem. I don't want people to think that, you know, because we haven't had brawls. We haven't had some of the egregious behavior that we have seen other places. I think that we're a basketball, football town. People are spirited. They love their sports. Yes, some people maybe push it a little bit too far, but I think it hasn't been a big problem, and the people that you've worked with, the behavior has corrected.
Absolutely. And Superintendent Garcia, you make a good point. There are 2 free online classes that if their behavior starts to escalate to the point where we have to ask them to complete it, they are both free. They're both through the NMAA and the NFHS network. One's called Sportsmanship, and the second one's called Positive Sport Parenting. And once they complete that, I do ask for that completion certificate so we can review that they did complete the course. The NMAA today really was adamant, and we were a hot topic of conversation, that the parents or those that are exhibiting those behaviors are the ones punished and not the student athlete.
NMAA has been very, very, very on this for a number of years. And I'm glad that they're supporting this statewide.
Yes.
Any questions, additional questions for Mr. Chavez? Okay. So, I mean, still it's around, Mr. Chavez may not be here in 10 years, and it's around codifying what is the consequence. So I think it's a good, I mean, I would like us to ask the superintendent. You already said you're doing it.
We are reviewing the policy. We have some recommendations. I don't want to share them today.
Okay.
We'll talk about them in board review. At that point, you can decide if you like what we say or you want us to do something else. We have some recommendations for you based on the existing policies, statutes, and policies in place by NMAA.
Mr. Garcia? Oh, yes, I was just actually very surprised at all of the media attention that we got for this. And headline. Right, and it was kind of, why is it needed? I don't know why it's needed. And I just think social media gets us in trouble and has us very, for lack of better terms, worried out there just because some fight happens in New Jersey or Georgia. Our community of Santa Fe is actually an excellent community. And for all a part of it, we actually get along. I think we all have respect whenever we all go to basketball, football games. We're not some of these other communities that are out there that we're sometimes compared to on a national basis, which Santa Fe is not. Santa Fe is still a great and awesome community. And so I would, and you have the NMAA saying, you know, we would get in there and we would jump in there and actually support Santa Fe, even talking to these parents or even talking to the school. So I think the procedures that we have are actually fine.
Ms. Noble.
When I was elected to be on the school board and before I took office, I went and did some research, as I often do in my trainings as a journalist, and I asked a lot of people in the community what needed to be done on the school board. And I was told by one person who's very attuned to the community and how we are working together, that what he saw as the problem with the school board is that there is a certain amount of micromanagement and distraction on issues that are not at the core of what we need to be working on, which is providing the best education, the best experience in our schools for our kids and the teachers who manage those classrooms all day, every day. I was reasonably upset when I read the headline in the newspaper. I went into the same mode and asked around, did the journalism exercise, getting in touch with people, is this an issue? Nobody said that it was. I think that there was a very good job done by Mr. Chavez in the paper of quantifying how many times this has had to be dealt with, which is not many in the past year. I've received a few emails about this, everyone saying it's a very bad idea to make kids responsible for parents' bad behavior. I have asked whether we have policies and procedures that cover it, and some of what we heard tonight is that we do. And I am pretty upset at, Mr. Garcia said earlier tonight that maybe we should take an ad in the paper about Santa Fe Public Schools being a great place. Well, I think we need to be aware of the deficit narrative that we can drive, that these headlines, this coverage, although we don't write the headlines and we don't control it, on some level we do, because we do feed the media. And we have given, frankly, fuel to the fire of the board not looking good, of a deficit narrative in the Santa Fe Public Schools, that this is not particularly good policy that we're spending our time on. To me, it has wasted district resources, staff time, my own time and energy at a critical time when we're going back to school, and we need to have the focus on the issues outlined in the dashboard here. And so I'm pretty unhappy with this. I don't think we need to codify a parent's code of behavior. I think that we have policies and procedures that, and the Athletic Association covers a lot of that. And I think that we as a board need to lead by example. We need to improve our operations. We need to behave professionally and prioritize what we're talking about. If something like this were brought to us by teachers and kids that we needed to deal with, then I would fully support it. But and maybe we can, if we're talking about ideas, maybe we can create a mechanism for policy suggestions to come out of the schools, out of our teachers and kids, out of the people who are on the ground. But this is not, I feel, how we should be doing business, and I would like us to, and we'll ask for it to be on board discussion, for us to talk about how we prioritize what we are addressing as a board and how we are truly evolving the district, supporting the staff, understanding the rhythm of the school year and where the energy needs to be, and working to continually improve our own process as we are asking our schools to continually improve what they do. So I'm not in favor of this. I think this has been not a particularly bright moment for the Santa Fe Public Schools, and I hope that we can get better in the future.
Me and then Ms. Price. So this was brought to me by refs and coaches. That's why it's here. And I think if you read the text of the article, you saw that most refs and coaches don't last through a third season. And when asked, it's because of adult abuse. And so, excuse me, I'm sorry, that's why this is here. And as far as procedure and everything else, we'll put that on the retreat. Would that work for you to have that as part of the retreat? Because it seems like board norms is really what you spoke about there.
I think, yes, I think it can be part of the retreat. I mean, the board norms, we had agreed that this was coming on August 7th, and I certainly nodded that it was okay to talk about it on August 7th, and the fact that we've moved it up, that, you know, we seem to be even sort of messing with our own agreements. So the norms are important, and, you know, I'd be interested to know how many refs and coaches, because truly I couldn't find anybody, and I did find people who were at the Capitol and St. Mike's game that was cited in the paper. I did read the text of all the articles, and a number of people said, no, it wasn't that bad. And it wasn't, you know, so, I mean, I tried to find somebody to say this needs to be addressed, and I couldn't.
Everything she said. Thank you.
Is there anything else on board discussion? Ms. Cashman.
I'm going to take the liberty. This is really is not on board discussion, but it's been in the newspaper. So I do want to, we've all read about the lawsuit, whether we call it the Yazzie or the Maldoff. They were both lawsuits. But I'd like to thank the original board. Santa Fe was, and I will bring it up again at our regular board meeting, but to thank the original board that went ahead and became a partner in that lawsuit that is going to hopefully benefit 89 districts in our state to improve education. And it took, you know, the original board was Frank Montano, Barbara Goodwin, Steve Carrillo, Linda Trujillo, and who am I missing? And Glenn Wickel. And I want to thank them for having the courage, because they got a lot of pushback from other districts, and other districts did not join in to help all of the kids in the state. And I also want to thank Superintendent, our former Superintendent Boyd, Joe Boyd, for going and starting with some of the testimony, and then, you know, Board Member Price added on to that. So I really want to we're not getting that much recognition for that, and I want to just, and I will again thank everybody. And then Superintendent Garcia went ahead and spent a lot of time testifying on behalf of all of our district and all of the districts. So I hope we don't go ahead and appeal the decision, and that we just move forward to figure out how to give a sufficient education to all of our children.
On this, one of the candidates running for governor, she has said that if she's elected, the first thing she's going to do is cancel the appeal. Well, you know how vindictive they can get.
Mr. President?
Yes, Dr. Garcia.
I'm not clear, because this was on for board discussion and the parent code of conduct, and then does the board want us to present on August 7th or not? Because it didn't seem like, maybe perhaps you need to take a vote or something, because it's...
Well, it seems like for everyone but me, it's a non-issue, even though it's refs and coaches that I spoke with about this, not some random phone calls. Yes, Ms. Price.
Yeah, I don't support this at all, and I'm not saying that this was your idea, but the notion that we would even consider holding children responsible for adult behavior is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. It's one of the reasons why I'm here tonight, and I probably shouldn't be, because I wanted to be put on record how outrageous to think that anybody would do such a thing. I'm sitting in my nightgown watching the news, and up comes this kid swimming, and the story about how this kid could get kicked off the swimming team because their parents misbehaved. Well, I'm sorry, my father was one of the first black Marines, and then he left the Marine Corps and went right in and became a New York City police officer. Do you think for a minute I could say to him, I don't like the way you behaved at my basketball game. You could all come to my funeral. So I just want it known, I do not support that at all, and I also don't support a new policy. And I wanted to ask, because this is now becoming years ago, at Santa Fe High, parents had to sign a code of conduct. Do they still, at registration?
I don't know if they actually sign, I think that has,
Because we used to keep it on record.
it's
so that
not
when-
really on the code of conduct, as we recall, we did check on that.
No, this wasn't at the code of conduct. This was specifically for Santa Fe for Santa Fe High.
Oh, that, I don't
And it was a
think so.
parent, it was a parent, and so we kept it in a file, so if a parent misbehaved, we pulled it out with their signature on it.
Right. I don't think they do that anymore, but
Okay.
we do have those policies, and we've had to do some restriction on some occasion. We've had to have a couple of parents where they're only allowed to communicate with one person in the district because there was so much harassment of teachers and principals and whatnot. Now, they can go to an IEP meeting, they can go to performance, but if they have other issues, they have to go through one person. So we have been able to legally limit access.
So,
So
board,
in
do you want to
respon- so in response to your question, no, I don't need this presentation again.
Okay. Ms. Noble, do the four of you not want it?
I think our policies already cover
Right.
this
That's fine.
situation.
Okay.
I understand what Board President Carrillo is saying, whenever you're a referee or an umpire or whatnot,
Coach,
that
yeah.
the coach, what, you know, the criticism that they get that I've done whenever the call isn't good, and when you call him zebra, you call him blue, but, you know, there's certainly, you just don't go overboard when you do that, and I think for majority of the point, all referees, coaches, and umpires, and whoever else is out there that has a role, is actually, they know what their role is, and they know what it is, and, you know, if a parent does go overboard, like Mr. Chavez said here, then the kid and the parent gets pulled aside and says, no more of that, don't go overboard, so I'm not supportive of it.
That's fine.
What,
Ms. Price?
and another thing that you said that was important to me is that, what if I go and misbehave? What are you going to do? Take away my, I'm not going to say my Starbucks card. Linda did that, and she got in all this trouble. You're going to take away my American Express card? You know, I don't mean you personally.
No,
you
I know.
You know, so, and if you said approximately 3/4 of the people at the games are not parents. So what are we going to do with the 3/4 who are acting like idiots? And I'm not saying that they are, because I agree with you, you know, that's not the case. We have had some bad incidents, but it's been a long time.
All right. There you go. Sorry, Mr. Barron, if that wasn't as explosive a meeting as you would like, and to anyone else that might have been watching, because based on the headline, I think that's what the public was hungry for. Anyway, so that's it. Unless somebody has something else they want to add to the meeting for board discussion or something to add for next week?
I would just like to bring up for the superintendent, and in regards to some of our capital outlay projects that we've had for the last 2, 3, maybe from the legislative session, some allocations that we have, just if we can get like a quarterly update of where those projects are or what's happening with that.
Well,
Yes,
I talked to Mr. Helford that when we do our, you know, when you meet as a committee of the whole for your finance subcommittee, that we're going to add where we are on capital outlay. And so that will become part of the process for that. And also just whoever was at Cabinet on Monday, if you could meet briefly in my office after this meeting, please. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, we're done. None of this was even supposed to be on here in order to get us out of here. Is there something on advanced planning? Yes.
Is the 14th the first day of school?
Yeah.
Can we eliminate that study session?
That would be very helpful for the staff. I was going to ask on the 7th if we could eliminate it because it's all hands on deck. It's a really tough day. And it's just preparing for the study session.
Yeah, I'm fine with it being eliminated. Everybody else fine with it being eliminated? All right.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Noble. Anything else tonight? All right, we're done.
All right, Cabinet, I promise I won't keep you long.